Hey, this is Lisa Graves with True North Research and Court Accountability Action. I am here on the Midas Touch Network. Please subscribe. Please share. We're here today as part of the Legal AF channel, and I am thrilled to have Traci Feit Love as our guest. She leads a group called Lawyers for Good Government that has been on the front lines of fighting to protect basic rights in suits against the Trump administration and more in terms of other organizing. And Traci helped launch this organization more than 8 years ago. I remember seeing its beginnings on Facebook, and I'm so excited that it has thrived with Traci's leadership as the founder. So please welcome Traci Feit Love to our show today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Traci. So I know that you are in the midst of some litigation with the Trump administration, but before we jump into that, can you just tell folks a little bit more about the organization that you helped launch during sort of before the first Trump administration, and perhaps how it has grown over these past 8+ years?
Absolutely. In the wake of the 2016 presidential election, I went on Facebook, like a lot of people did. And I really was looking for solidarity. I was looking to connect with other lawyers who were concerned about some of the rhetoric we heard during the campaign, and brainstorm what we could do as attorneys to help protect civil rights and human rights and uphold the constitutional oath that we all swore when we became attorneys. And it turned out that about 125,000 other lawyers across the country were also interested in having that conversation. And that was incredible. I didn't expect that. But the amount of energy and what I learned along the way in terms of that group coming together really showed me that there was a need for an organization that could help to mobilize more attorneys as volunteers, whether pro bono legal work or other types of volunteer work. And so that's what we have worked to do ever since that time. In our first 8 years as an organization, we mobilized more than $100 million in pro bono legal services. And that's all through programs that we run. And this year alone, because of our growth in 2025, we're on track to mobilize about 50 million. So our capacity is expanding. In terms of our growth, right, it started just with me and a massive group of volunteers. And today I'm really proud to share, we have a staff of 42 people across the country, located in, I think, 18 states all over the United States. And because of that, we're able to mobilize far more volunteer work and far more pro bono work than we ever could have back when it was just me and my computer.
Wow. I remember when I was going to law school and I would sometimes get the question, aren't there already too many lawyers? And I would say there aren't enough good lawyers. And there aren't enough lawyers who are devoted to public service versus themselves. And so this is really extraordinary that you've been able to help assemble that many lawyers and have that, basically the valuation of what that pro bono legal support means. But let me zero in on some of your most recent activity, Traci. And can you tell us about the suit that Lawyers Against Government filed against the Trump administration this year?
Absolutely. And I'll start by sharing that for the first, I think, 7 or 8 years of our existence as an organization, we really didn't do litigation. And that was a purposeful decision. There were already so many amazing organizations doing impact litigation. And it seemed to us for many years that there was bigger gaps in other areas, direct legal services to individuals who needed it, for example. We spent a lot of time and a lot of effort, for instance, helping asylum seekers during the first Trump administration, not through massive class actions or policy, but one-on-one, matching lawyers with clients and doing our best to help one person at a time. We've also done a lot of legal research and policy work and advocacy. But what has become clear since January of this year is that the amount of litigation that is required to push back against the attacks that we are seeing from this administration is so great that even the existing impact litigation organizations and the legal profession as a whole could not sustain it with the existing infrastructure. And so what we realized is a lot of attorneys who are individuals, not necessarily working within nonprofits or at big firms, want to get engaged in litigation. So it was clear to us we would need to build our own in-house litigation team. And that's what we've done. But because we are lawyers for good government and we are built on volunteer energy, we knew that our litigation program, which we've called the Pro Bono Litigation Corps, would need to involve as many individual lawyer volunteers as possible. It's an untapped resource in terms of this type of work. So that's how we chose to proceed. And we've had hundreds of attorneys already sign up saying they're willing to donate 10, 20 hours a week of their time for months at a time to be able to contribute to this work. And we're proud now that our new initiative will be able to provide those attorneys with things they need: malpractice insurance, access to legal research tools, supervision and oversight from our experienced staff attorneys, all of those things that make it possible for individuals to volunteer. So that's the Pro Bono Litigation Corps. And the first case that we've brought as Pro Bono Litigation Corps was a major class action in co-counsel with the Southern Environmental Law Center, Earth Justice, and others on behalf of a group of about 350 environmental justice grantees who had their grants and their programs unceremoniously terminated in a way that we believe was contrary to the terms of the program that they were working under. And that's wreaking havoc. We're talking $3 billion worth of grants and programs that are designed to sustain communities, to help remove lead pipes so that children have clean, healthy water to drink. Programs designed to allow for better protection against flooding, for example, and major weather events. So these are really important programs, and our lawsuit is challenging those terminations and looking to restore that funding to the group of grantees and the communities that they represent.
Wow, Traci, that is amazing. Let's unpack that, because you had a lot of impact right there in those last few sentences in terms of what these grants are about. So it's $3 billion worth of grants that were appropriated by Congress, signed into law by President Biden, authorized to help support local communities in environmental justice issues, which, is a big sounding word, but as a practical matter, it means a lot to individual households, individual communities, and that includes abatement of lead pipes. So many cities had lead pipes, a century ago, and those lead pipes leached lead into the water supply, or houses had lead pipes in them, and that lead is a neurotoxin that has an effect on human brain development. And so these are this decision to try to claw back these grants is affecting the health of children and families in communities across the country, and also has other impacts that you've described, along with your partners, Earth Justice and the Southern Environmental Law Center. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that class action and other ways in which this unilateral action by Donald Trump is hurting so many communities across the country? It's not just about the money, because the money is like what's on the surface, but it's about the impact on people's lives.
Absolutely. I'll give you a couple of examples of communities that were impacted. So one of them is the native village of Kipnuk, which is a federally recognized tribe located in remote Western Alaska. They had a grant to erect an erosion barrier, and without it, they believe they will have to relocate the entire village. The program was underway, and again, unceremoniously, we're told no money, no program. That's a massive impact on a group of people who have been disproportionately affected by everything that we have done as a nation over the past couple of hundred years. They needed this program. They deserve this program. And all of us are better off when they have these programs. Every time we have to react in a crisis to an emergency weather event, that drains resources. Far better to put those resources into preventing the disasters than trying to recover from them after the fact. Another example is Air Alliance Houston. This was a grant provided funding for an air quality monitoring system that has been now shut down in Houston, which is one of the most polluted cities in the US. And that type of pollution has health impacts, which all of us end up paying for, putting aside the personal and family impact of all of those people who will get sick, some of whom will die. That has a massive impact. And these are programs that, again, Congress said, we want these programs. And the president has decided without explanation, that they are no longer in alignment with their priorities. So in other words, they don't place a priority on children's health. They don't place a priority on community preservation. They don't place a priority on prevention. So one has to wonder what their priorities actually are. If those things aren't the function of good government, I don't know what is.
Well, that's right. And you think about the growing rates of asthma for kids and how that affects both kids and adults who have asthma to be in these environments where there's so much pollution. It's been shocking to see some of the policy decisions of the Trump administration unfold this effort to basically decimate tracking of pollution, along with decimating these, or trying to decimate these grants. The litigation that you have filed with your co-counsel or not plaintiffs, but your co-counsel in this class action. What's happening? What's the status of that litigation, and what are the next steps on it?
Well, I believe we have a hearing coming up, and I will refer to my staff for more details on the exact status. I know they're working on this every day, but I believe the hearing coming up is we're going to have to defend against jurisdictional challenges and some of the things that this administration is challenging every piece of litigation brought against it on these types of technical and jurisdictional grounds. So we have to get through that, and then we'll see where that takes us.
Right. And so this case is filed in federal court. And it is targeting this edict, basically this directive by Donald Trump, by his administration to stop these grants that were already underway. Can you talk a little bit more about how your work is structured? I know you've described the enormous value of the pro bono support that you have from thousands of lawyers, and also that you have a team in place that's continuing to provide the kind of direct services that are the bread and butter of lawyers against good government. But you also if you have a staff that big, you've got to sustain it with funding and grants or donations. Can you talk a little bit about how the work that you're doing on behalf of the American people is funded or can be supported?
Absolutely. So we've been very fortunate. We've received grants from a number of major foundations that have supported every step that's gotten us to this point. I think one really important thing to know is that the litigation we're involved with now was possible in part because of a non-litigation, or what you might consider a pre-litigation program that we launched, that we started preparing for even before this administration took office. And that was for a program called the Fund Protection Clinic. So again, that program was set up not with litigation in mind, but with the idea of how can we help all of these grantees that we know are going to be threatened. Their funds will be frozen, their programs will be terminated. How can we help protect as much of that federal money as possible? Because if that money evaporates, it's not coming back. Philanthropy, which is doing what it can in no way make up for the resources of the federal government. So we need to protect these dollars. Through our Fund Protection Clinic, we've provided direct guidance to, I think now more than 850 federal grantees. And it was that work, gathering information, providing guidance, learning more about what was going on the front lines, that made it possible for us to get to the point of litigation. And a similar thing is happening in our other issue areas. So it's really powerful to have programming, not just designed for the end result of the big impact litigation, but also to help everyone along the way, which then informs the litigation and ensures that we have a frontline view of what's going on versus sitting kind of in an abstract ivory tower. And how the work is funded, as I said, we have support from foundations, but we also rely very heavily on individual donations from people who care about this work. Our Pro Bono Litigation Corps, for example, would not exist without the support of a group of trial lawyers in Atlanta, including someone named Jay Sad, who decided to come together and get this work funded. And they made contributions that made this program possible. But also attorneys like Gary DiBianco, who has been helping us to get this program off the ground. He's a retired Skadden litigation partner. He retired a couple of years ago and is volunteering with us now full time to make this work possible. So it's the combination of individual donations, individual willingness to volunteer, and the ongoing support from foundations that makes this work possible.
Yeah, that is really helpful to know because, a lot of people want to do good. They want to help in some ways, but having a structure like the one that you've put together, Traci, is so vital in making those commitments real, those desires real, in terms of having both the legal talent, the volunteer talent, but also the support structure to take on these battles like this. I wonder if you feel comfortable talking a little bit about that $3 billion in grants that is part of that class action suit that you filed, the organization has filed with your allies, and what we're seeing unfold in real time on a parallel track, which was this effort by Congress to make permanent these tax cuts for some of the richest people on the planet. Some of the richest people who've ever lived on the planet, basically billionaires who do not need more tax breaks, and ripping that out of the hands of ordinary people and ordinary communities. When you talk about what good government is, what it can be, what it must be, maybe you could share a little bit about your thoughts on, why Trump has done this, or like more about what that impact is and what the trade-offs are.
Well, I think what we're seeing, and others have described it as this as well, is the greatest governmental transfer of wealth in our history from, let's just say, average people. And by average, I'm including 80% of our population, if not more, and the wealthiest 1%, or even the 1% of the 1%. We are taking, and it's not only through the tax cuts, but it's the combination of taking all of these dollars, billions and billions of dollars that were meant to support things that everyone needs: education, clean air, clean water, healthcare, all of these things we depend on. Take those dollars and redirect them for what? For something that will help make the country better? No, for something that will make the wealthiest people slightly more wealthy. And those dollars, as we've seen since the 80s, do not trickle down. Instead, they stay in the ether with the wealthiest and their descendants forever. That's what happens to those dollars. It doesn't support our economy. It doesn't support workers. It doesn't support families. It doesn't actually help anyone other than those few people who just, I guess, need the knowledge that they have a few extra $1 billion or a few extra $1 million. I don't know, because it's so far away from anything I consider logical. When we think about what government is, it goes back to this idea, for me, that the founders put into place initially, which they got a lot of things wrong. But one thing they got right is that a good government should advance the ability of the people to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if we're not supporting the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of all people in the United States, then our government is not doing its job. It's choosing to care only about a very select few people and corporations, and everyone else is on their own. It's terrible.
Yeah, it really is. When I think about our Constitution as well as the Declaration of Independence, it starts with these words: "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution." And so this system that we're seeing unfold under Donald Trump is one that really is contrary to those core principles, in my view. And it's also like this bill of goods, selling this idea of making America great again. But then in reality, the policies are degrading our public services, degrading the systems that people rely on, as you point out. And this is by a lame duck president who's not going to face reelection.
That's right.
Because of the two-term limit in the Constitution, notwithstanding some of his other, musings. But the fact is that he can only be held accountable through the courts and also through public opinion, perhaps in the midterms, for example. Do you all? I don't want to get ahead of myself in terms of suits you may have underway, but I imagine now that you filed this one particular suit, you all would consider filing future litigation if it fits your mission and your allyship.
Oh, absolutely. We built the Pro Bono Litigation Corps program so that we could do exactly that. And in fact, a very exciting development. I won't give out her name yet, but on August 18th, we have a very senior attorney who worked for 20 years at the DOJ in the Civil Division, who is joining us as our litigation director. She is absolutely incredible. I'm really looking forward to working with her. And I know she, along with the team we are building to support her, is going going to be able to lead our organization and all of our amazing volunteers in litigation that we hope will contribute to the fight against these unconstitutional acts and attacks from the administration. I mean, what we've seen, we talked a little bit in this conversation about the attacks on the people. We've also seen attacks directly on the legal profession. These individual executive orders targeting specific law firms, not for any crime that they've even been accused of, but because of the political leanings or someone that they chose to represent at some point in the past. All of that is an attempt to control who has access to justice. And when we saw that, we knew we had to do more, because judges, courtrooms, putting aside the Supreme Court, courts have been the one institution that have been trying to push back against the unconstitutional actions of the administration, but judges can only decide on cases that are in front of them. And this administration choosing to attack the lawyers, the litigators, the profession as a whole is an attempt to see fewer of those cases reach the courthouse. And we can't let that happen. That's why we decided if we have to mobilize every lawyer in the United States in order to provide the type of legal response that is required, then that's what we're going to do. So yes, there will be future litigation. We plan to coordinate very closely with other organizations and try to fill in the gaps. We're not looking to take the lead on major litigation that is better handled by organizations like the ACLU or Public Citizen or Democracy Forward. We're trying to figure out where can let's call them the little guys, which is what they called us in the New York Times article, the solo practitioners, the retired lawyers, the former government lawyers. How can we ensure that they are contributing their skills and their resources to the fight in a way that advances our collective movement towards justice? And that's what we will focus on going forward.
Well, it's just so exciting to see this organizing among lawyers. I'm reminded of some actions that a lot of Americans never heard about, just, not paying attention to foreign news. But there was a mobilization of judges in Poland a few years ago when that judiciary was being assailed by an authoritarian rising regime, in essence, in that country. And it was the legal community, the judicial community, along with lawyers who stood up for the idea of impartial justice. Unfortunately, in my opinion, we have this captured U.S. Supreme Court that now in a number of cases has overturned lower court rulings that were justified, lower court rulings to restrain the activity of these unilateral edicts, these really extreme measures that Trump was taking without, congressional authority, without congressional authorization, in defiance of legal precedents, in defiance of statutes, regulations, union contract agreements, and more. And so, it's a very challenging environment given that the way this U.S. Supreme Court under John Roberts is behaving. But we've seen examples in other countries of ordinary judges and ordinary lawyers coming together to defend justice and organize together. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your vision as an organizer, or what, and also what ordinary people can do, whether they're a lawyer or not, to help respond to the crisis that we're facing.
Yes. The key is that everyone has to do their part. And I think that's an important point for so many of us who are feeling like there's so much going on. There are so many problems that need to be solved. There's so many unjust things happening that need to be addressed. But the reality is no one person, no one community, no one organization can possibly address all of that. So we need the lawyers to do what they can as lawyers. And we need organizers and communities to speak up and be activists and do their part. And they are. And we need the scientists to contribute their knowledge, right? When we're talking about attacks on things like reproductive rights or access to gender affirming care, which scientists and healthcare providers all agree are so critical, and yet legislatures and courts across our country are deciding are not important without regard for what the scientists and the healthcare providers have to say. So all of us have to do our part. And what I have personally observed amongst lawyers is that there is a massive commitment and dedication to doing our part. And I think you saw that not only in terms of the volunteer activity, but also we helped coordinate something called Law Day of Action on May 1st. So every year, for a long time, the ABA has led something called Law Day, which is meant to be a day honoring and upholding the rule of law in our country. But this year, it had to be not just Law Day, but a Law Day of action. And we mobilized more than 10,000 lawyers in more than 40 cities across the country to stand up and speak out. Just at our event in DC, where we stood outside the Supreme Court, we had, I think, more than 600 or 700 people, most of whom were lawyers, who showed up. And that's something you haven't really seen in our country up until this point, is a movement, not just in which lawyers participated, but in which we are organizing as lawyers and speaking collectively as a profession. And that's something we have to continue to do. And I hope that the general public sees something like that and realizes that if you see thousands and thousands of lawyers across the country taking time out of their day to attend a protest, to speak out, to reaffirm our oaths, which is something that we did in dozens of cities across the country, that means something has gone terribly wrong with our government and our legal system, when it's not just lawyers representing clients, but actually looking at what are the best interests of the people. How do we uphold the Constitution? How do we defend the rule of law? And lawyers are doing that and will continue to do that. And I'm really proud of our profession for that.
Yeah, Legal AF, a co-host, participated in that reaffirming of the oath process. That was just brilliant and excellent organizing. And thank you so much for all that you've been doing, Traci, to hold the Trump administration accountable, to defend common sense and the rule of law. Is there anything you want to share that gives you hope? Share with folks? I mean, that certainly gave me hope, your description of that, but is there anything that helps sustain your determination before we close this conversation out today?
I'll tell you what gives me hope is people, individual volunteers, lawyers emailing us every day, asking how they can help, filling out our volunteer forms, signing up for projects, donating dozens and dozens of hours of their time. And not just that, also our staff. I have to say, the staff at Lawyers for Good Government, I may be biased, but I think it's one of the best group of people that's ever come together, and they give me hope every day. Many of them are personally affected, themselves and their families, by the attacks on civil and human rights going on in our country, and yet they show up every day and they do the work and they figure out how they can be of service. And there's our funders as well, our donors, people like I mentioned, the trial lawyers who are saying, well, we're not necessarily going to be the ones to litigate these cases, but someone's got to. What we have as a resource is money, so we're going to put it somewhere that we know it can make a difference. And I think it's all of those actions, every person, every lawyer, every funder who is stepping up and saying, I want to do my part. That's what gives me hope. That's what keeps me going. And I know that they're going to continue to do everything that they can to support our work. That is our strength. Is not any one person or any one organization, but the fact that we are a movement, we are a broad community, we're all in this together, and we're all going to pull our own weight.
Well, that was wonderful, Traci. Thank you so much for inspiring us all. And thank you, everyone, for joining in, watching this program. I hope you'll share it. I hope you'll subscribe. This is Lisa Graves with Legal AF on the Midas Touch Network. And I've been joined today by Traci Feit Love and her group, Lawyers for Good Government. Please tune back in to get more inspiration about how people can fight back against these excesses by the Trump administration and how we can all do our part to sustain the hope we need to make the world a better place. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Traci.
Thank you.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.